morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to start with quick, there we go. If for some reason, I will be sharing my screen most of the presentation, so if something does pop up that shouldn't be there, or if anything goes out, just give me a quick shout out, and we can fix that. So just to make sure we can reading view slideshow. All right. So good morning. My name is Kimberly Ballaro, and I am the director of the Holocaust Education Resource and Outreach Center, the Hero Center at Voices of Hope. Don't let the name fool you. This is not actually a place. Not really. It is a program. The Hero Center is a joint initiative between Voices of Hope and the Maurice Greenberg Center for Judaic Studies at the University of Hartford. Actually, I will actually move this out of presentation view. I do want to be able to have some notes up here. You can still see just the presentation, is that correct?
That's correct.
Beautiful. I had some notes here that I wanted to make sure that I don't miss anything. So that's perfect. So I do see there is a chat option, so I would love to see who I'm speaking to. So if you would like, I would love to see what school you teach at, which grades you're teaching, if you are new to teaching the Holocaust or not, and what books, films, and other materials that you use in your classroom. Also, please feel free to send questions and comments throughout the presentation, and I will do my best to get to each of your questions. So a little background into who we are. Voices of Hope is an educational nonprofit organization founded by the children of Holocaust survivors. It has come a long way in about the 12 years of its existence, but now we hold about 15 educational and commemorative events annually. Of course, with all of our programming pivoting to online, we're actually holding a lot more events online. So I think we've certainly surpassed our 12 to 15 a year. So our main goal is to promote a culture of courage to stand up against hatred through Holocaust and genocide education and remembrance. We engage local survivors and their families, as well as educators, students, and the community at large, in meaningful programming that is aimed at creating greater empathy in general, but also to encourage them to use their voice to combat hatred in the many forms that it manifests itself. Over the last few years, the Maurice Greenberg Center for Judaic Studies and Voices of Hope have collaborated on engaging students in museum tours and presentations, really, but did not have the time and staff power to build the program. So enter the beginning of the Hero Center, which was a project that was dedicated to this. Since 2018, the Hero Center has reached more than 12,000 students. With its programming, it has offered these museum tours, presentations, and talks with Holocaust survivors, and we continue to offer these services since the lockdown began in March. We have pivoted to virtual talks with survivors and their children. And we also offer the presentations that we would do during a museum tour. We can organize virtual talks like that, and also lessons for students and PD for educators. Most importantly, though, we have taken the physical exhibit, Hartford Remembers the Holocaust, which is in the Museum of Jewish Civilization at the University of Hartford. We've taken this physical exhibit and transformed it into a virtual one. with brand new curriculum, survivor testimony, and resources for the classroom. And this is what we will be looking at today. Let's see, 1 second. So this is just a quick look at what the physical exhibit looked like. So this virtual exhibit was actually meant to be a traveling exhibit. You can see from the photos a little bit that it's a very small space. And if you've been to the physical exhibit, you'll know that really how small it is. This is just to give you an idea of what the space, what it looks like and what it contains. And really, we began reaching more students than ever with these museum tours. Groups got bigger and bigger. To the point where schools were booking multiple days to make sure their students could come and visit. So needless to say, we started running out of space and time and resources to accommodate the increasing demand, and so we started planning for a traveling version that would really, I would pack up in the back of my car and drive around the state to schools who were doing their Holocaust and genocide units, and that would be a kind of it could they could finish their units with a survivor presentation, perhaps someone who was featured in the exhibit, and really, I would say 5 days before Connecticut went into its initial lockdown, my colleagues and I were at a design business looking at panels and fabric and stands. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to fit all of this in my car? And the running joke was that I was going to have to go for my trucker's license in order to actually do this. Of course, once we realized we would be at home for the foreseeable future, it was clear we needed another strategy. And the virtual exhibit was, I guess, conceived, we can say. We worked with 2 master teachers who created curriculum for us and for the museum in the past, as well as a media specialist to build a website around the stories of local Holocaust survivors that could be used in and out of the classroom. I'm going to stop that share and actually bring up the website itself. Okay, so welcome to our virtual exhibit, Connecticut Remembers the Holocaust. One thing I want you, or that we want you to know about this exhibit, is that it is a living and growing virtual space that we will continue to improve and to expand. This is really brand new. We only really launched it last week as part of the University of Hartford's Holocaust Educators Workshop. So there is still more that we need to do with this, but for really, it is more or less ready to be put into your classroom. And we wanted to give teachers time now to start working through the content and the structure, perhaps to be able to use it in their spring Holocaust and genocide units. From our experience, we find a lot of schools or a lot of curriculum cover World War I and World War II later in the year. That's not, of course, that's just in general. That, of course, we have a lot of requests for programming in the fall as well, but the bulk of it is in the spring. So we did want to give teachers a chance to really kind of play with it before being able to implement it. I will talk a little bit more about how it's going to expand in the future at the end, but this is a really important aspect of the space. The main page here briefly introduces you to the goal of the project, as well as the survivors featured. These are the 6 survivors featured in the physical exhibit. At the moment, we are working on adding a 7th survivor story, and we're very excited about that. So just very briefly, on the left, you have your main menu. The About page is an introduction to 3 big questions that kind of frame the exhibit itself. Why, what, and how we remember the Holocaust. This may be a little bit more reading for your students and may require a little extra pre-teaching of vocabulary. We have considered creating a glossary for the page, for the website. At this time, we don't have that, but it is something that we're talking about creating. This page also gives credit to the many people who are involved in creating the physical exhibit and the virtual one. So it is a little bit lengthy, but it does give a brief introduction to what the Holocaust was, and why it's important to Connecticut and to how we remember. So what you'll see here on the left is that we have created middle school, grade 9, and grades 10 to 12 curriculum. The structures, we won't go through all of them, but we can maybe start with the middle school section. Each section follows a similar structure. We won't comb through each page today, but I'll go a little into detail for each of them. But just click on the section that you'll find, and you'll find these 3 key questions here at the top. Middle school, we focus a bit on identity, empathy, and refugees. But yeah, so each section you'll find these 3 kind of key questions, followed by the 3 parts of the lesson. So starting with identity and empathy, this is basically your lesson plan right here. Let's go to this. So it basically just lays it out for you, the objectives, the goals, and a step-by-step guide with some quick links to the worksheets that you'll need. Students can access these at home. You can pass them out in your classroom if you have some of your students there. And so this is really great for for continuity in this very unpredictable school year. So students and educators, if you're team teaching, this will be great because it's one space where you have the same materials, and this will help you if you have to teach from home, if you're in the classroom, if your students are at home, if they're in the classroom. So it's really great for that across the board. You have a kind of an interactive activity for students to do first, followed by an introduction to what the Holocaust was. As always, you know your students best. If this is very sensitive material. If the content of a particular article that we have featured, maybe this one from the USHMM, if it's too much for the group, if you have an introduction that works for you, please do so. Our aim is not to traumatize, but to create understanding and encourage students to ask more questions. And I encourage each of you to also share your experiences with introducing the Holocaust to your students in the chat. And then finally, we have here we have the video Remember, which was specifically created for the physical exhibit. We begin most of our museum tours with this film. It's about 6 minutes. It features the children of local survivors. It gives a very brief overview of what the Holocaust was and why it is important to remember it. There is a worksheet which goes along with it, and it is a really great short introduction to the subject. So this is all right here for you. So they can watch the film and answer questions as they go. So the next section, Learning from Survivors. Again, every grade level has this. You have Learning from Survivors, and you have the 6 survivors here with their story, a map and timeline. So we can just start with Leon Comites. Each survivor page has a text of their story in this time. Leon was born in Poland, in Katowice in 1935. He ended up being dropped off at a Uniate church and monastery orphanage in Western Ukraine at the age of 7, in which he had to completely change his identity. His name was changed. He had to learn a new language. He was separated from his brother in case they gave each other away. He really has an incredible story, and he is, I warn you now, when you read his story, really any of the survivors here, when you read his story and then learn more about really, I think listening to his oral testimony, which is here, you will just fall in love with each of these people. These interviews were done specifically for the Hartford Remembers the Holocaust exhibit, and we are very grateful that that we are able to use this oral testimony with this virtual space. So each survivor page has their story text, the oral testimony, and then also a presentation with, I'll start this, so with photos, so family photos, maps of where they lived at the time, maps of the cities that they lived in. So a lot of primary documents. These are also, so the presentations are things that we're specifically working on at the moment. So for example, these are in 3 different languages, but we will be providing, either quick translations or notes about what it is the students are looking at. So you'll see Leon is right here. He was being protected and kind of posed as a Christian boy throughout the war years. So you get to see how the survivors survived, really. These are stories of survival, but then also how they rebuilt their lives. You get a lot of context with what was happening in this area and how dangerous was it. And then also you have, I have to move you to the other side here. We also have maps and a worksheet that students can fill out as they read and as they listen to the survivor stories. They can look at the map, kind of pinpoint where it was the survivor was in a given year, how old were they, and you can kind of trace geographically where they had been moving around. As you can see, it does. I think we will be improving these maps because the borders are not exactly. These are contemporary borders, and we do want to make sure that students have a better idea of geography at the time. And so these will be continuously updated and improved. And now I'll move you back. Okay, so then even with, so yes, we have the text, the slideshow, maps and documents, contextualization of their experience. And really at the middle school level, this will be important for students to keep in mind the identity activity that they do earlier and apply what was discussed to what they're learning about a survivor. The final section for middle school is Refugees Today. And this is a collection of short testimonies. So these are just really short testimonies of children who survived who have a refugee experience during the Holocaust. But then you're able to move to a presentation on migration and refugees today, and some very short excerpts and activities that will help students both better understand what was happening to people and migration leading up to and during the Holocaust, but it also contextualizes the refugee crisis today and encourages students to look at the similarities and the differences between the two. So then last but not least for this section, there are supplemental lessons on various topics. We've included we've included the Connecticut state standards on each page to kind of just as a reminder, and how these supplemental materials will kind of help you meet those standards. So this is kind of the overview of the structure of each section. So we see that in grade 9, we have world history. You still have your key questions. In world history, we focus on upstanders, these kind of categories of behavior, perpetrators, bystanders, upstanders. And what I think is really wonderful about this is that it's very user-friendly. And this is something that we can very easily change with, for example, changing language. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum is actually shifting this word bystanders to onlookers, which kind of changes the way we look at that kind of behavior of really how people acted during this time. What we really love about this is that every section has a civic engagement section, and gives students a chance to create something or to do something hands-on that encourages them to do something good for their neighborhood or their community, and to really get them thinking about what is it they can do that can improve their community or make a difference. And so you see that in all 3 of these sections. Believe it or not, that is really just one section here. So we won't do that for all 3 of these grade levels. One thing I will point out, we are coming up on the 82nd anniversary of Kristallnacht, so this might be a good place to look, regardless of which grade you teach. If you are looking to commemorate or do a special lesson on Kristallnacht, you can find that here. So in the supplemental, you have the links to these lessons, but they're also right here embedded in the page. Dismiss. You will also see these right in the page. So you can print these out, or you should be able to print them out anyway. So you'll find so much information on this. One really quick thing, there is this search bar here as well. If you are looking to do a lesson plan on Kristallnacht, you can just put that in there and you'll find the supplemental lessons. You'll see that there's an article here in the grade 9 lesson plan. It's mentioned here in the history of survivors. And also, really importantly, it points you to Margot Jeremias, who is one of the featured survivors, who lived outside of Heidelberg and very vividly remembers Heidelberg just in complete chaos during Kristallnacht. So I think the search bar will actually be really helpful for you. If you are teaching the book Night, this is great. I didn't think it didn't go to the right night that I was thinking of, but it took me exactly where I wanted to go. If you're teaching Night, Abby Weiner's story will be very important. Abby and Elie Wiesel are from the same town. They were transported to Auschwitz on the same train. Their tattoo numbers are only 5 numbers different. This will be a really important lesson for students if you are reading that. I will point out Abby Weiner passed away in 2019, January 2019. And so I think it's also very important and I think maybe that's something that we can improve on. One of the big questions we got when students visited the museum was, are these people still alive? And I've had to point out that 2 of these survivors have passed over the last 3 years, Margot Jeremias and Abby Weiner. So this is a really important thing for us to also remember, is that these are only 6 survivors from the community. There are many more, but they're in their late 80s and their early 90s. I should say I just helped a friend survivor celebrate his 100th birthday 2 weeks ago. I mean, it's really incredible the presence that our survivors still have in the community. So there really is so much here. And if you're really unsure of if refugees fit into your curriculum, or if you want to focus on the concentration camps, you can put a quick search on Auschwitz or Buchenwald or Bergen-Belsen, and you should be able to find information that'll help you out. So if we move down a bit, the Holocaust Survivor tab here, this is just to kind of outline the objectives of using testimony. And each of these, this brings you straight to their pages. So these are our 6 survivors. We will continue adding them, but you can see each of their stories here. And so we always encourage, there is a lot of information here. So we encourage students to maybe pick one survivor to focus on. So we've focused mostly on these 6, but we also have included a previous exhibit in the Museum of Jewish Civilization, Portraits of Survival by Lena Stein. This was a project that I think when the museum opened, I think 2016, I think this is when the exhibit first opened. But this was the exhibit that was in the main part of the museum, the kind of temporary exhibit. And what it is a beautiful collection of portraits of local survivors and a very brief overview of their story. So Gisela and Edith, I don't even know what to say about them. Just looking at their photos makes me smile. But you have so many more stories here. Actually, they're not as brief as I originally thought. But you have so many beautiful stories here. And I think what I love about this particular site is how much it humanizes the people that we've come to know and love for students. There are beautiful portraits here. And I'm so excited that Lena Stein has allowed us to use these photos on the virtual exhibit. These stories can be very easily implemented into your curricula as well, or if you're using specifically our curricula here. And we really encourage both educators and students alike to learn more about these individuals, because their experiences are so varying. And they really give us so many examples of perseverance and strength, but the breadth of survival, the breadth of experiences during this time. If you are looking more closely at how people remember, the grade 10 to 12 curriculum does include, it has a focus on memorials, and I think this is going to be a very important thing for us all to look at, seeing what's happening in our own country with the question of monuments and memorials, and what they bring to the community, but also how you can use them as educational tools. That will be really important there, but also a history of survivors in Hartford. This page will also help with that, with looking at how people remember. This could give students more insight into how survivors themselves have created this realm of remembrance over the years in Connecticut specifically, and really the inspiration for a lot of the events that we hold every year. So again, it is a little bit more reading. I think I would suggest this for a group, probably junior or seniors in high school. But it outlines so many local survivors that have contributed to creating this community of survivors and their families but really to get the community to remember and to actively remember, not just not just say, okay, now I know about this and it's good that I know. Survivors in Connecticut and around the world have spent a lot of time and energy trying to make sure that we actively remember, that we do something about it, that we do something that is good for the community. The last two sections are really self-explanatory. Resources, these are, I've divided them up really for your Connecticut-based resources. And this, of course, includes Voices of Hope and the Hero Center. But also, we are expanding our partnership with UConn, Center for Judaic Studies and Contemporary Jewish Life. They're increasing their programming, and we're working closer together. Avi Pat, the director of the center, he is essentially he is the creator of the physical exhibit, and so he's been working with us to make sure that this is a good virtual space and an easy space for teachers to use. This, of course, will be expanded because we are expanding our partnerships with different universities and institutions and organizations, and so this will be expanded, of course. But then we also wanted to make sure that especially teachers who are either new to teaching the Holocaust or just new teachers, these are your staples. These are your vetted staples for teaching the Holocaust. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum provides so much wonderful material for teachers who are starting with this. We haven't met with too many educators, I think, at this point who have never taught it before, but we've had a handful. And the general consensus among them is that they're terrified of teaching it. And so we don't want anyone to be terrified. So these are kind of your basics here. They're the fundamentals, they're online teaching tools, Yad Vashem, Echoes and Reflections, Facing History and Ourselves. These are really, really powerful, impactful, and easy to use resources, in my opinion. So that, of course, will be expanded as we continue our work here. And then finally, feedback. It's exactly that. As I mentioned, this is a living document for Holocaust and genocide education. And your feedback on how to build and expand and improve this site can be done with your help. I would say it can't be done without it. So we certainly hope that even if you don't get to use it, if you can review the pages to see what you think works, what doesn't, there's a lot that we need to know about the teachers who are using this, but also what worked for you, what didn't, what would you like to see on this page. So again, this will be kind of an ongoing project. That being said, we do have a lot of plans for the site. This includes a space for teachers to submit projects, ideas, successes, etc. I would love to have a students' corner where we can have students send us reflections about what they learned on the exhibit. For example, actually, let me see, stop share, and then I'm going to go back to this right here. You'll see in the photo that we have on the right here a remember wall. I would love to have something like this put onto the page. In the physical exhibit, visitors are encouraged to leave a little note saying, what will you remember from this experience? What reflections do you have about what you learned from Leon or Abby, and what will you do to honor that memory and take this knowledge with you. So we would love to replicate the physical one in the museum. And I think our biggest expansion, which will take a little more time, is including other genocides. We truly want this to be a space where teachers can go for inspiration, ready-made materials that are relevant for Connecticut students, and be able to meet the spirit of the state legislation rather than the letter of the legislation. So that will be, I think, a huge undertaking, but it's something that we're really excited about because we work with a lot of very knowledgeable educators and scholars who have worked on various genocides. And we want this to kind of be your one-stop shop for Holocaust and genocide materials. We were so excited about this legislation being passed, and we're so excited to be working with so many people to help educators work to effectively address the spirit of the mandate, which I think is to create greater empathy, and to create a greater awareness of your neighbors or people in another state who are struggling with something, or people in another country. We really want to create that awareness and that empathy. And I think this is what our aim of trying to implement this legislation is. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. And so I would love to hear any comments that you have, any initial feedback that you might have about the website. Now that we are here, I'm going to actually pop the link into the chat here so you can go straight to it. It is a Google site. I think all teachers at this point are very familiar with the Google Docs and sites and such. It was something new for me, but we've been happy building it. So the site is there, and if you do have any questions about our programming, about talks with survivors or anything, I'm also just popping my email right in the chat. So I would love to open it up to questions or reflections, anything at all. Thank you so much for listening.
Kim, I think that the organization has proved to be pretty nimble given the crisis with at home or hybrid learning, and being able to move a lot of that online so it's accessible to people. That's like moving, I'm sure, a big mountain. It wasn't easy to do, and I thought it was really creative to be able to do that. Now it's accessible at any time, anywhere, not just because of COVID either, moving forward in the future. I mean, your connection to Night, the book, Elie Wiesel, and the simple, it's not simple, it's just an easy connection, I think, to a survivor here in Connecticut. That's mind-blowing. So any ELA teacher in any grade working with that book has this easy connection to this website. I think that's a really great resource for people.
Absolutely, yes, and I think what we are also hoping for is more collaboration on teaching. So we would love. So while legislation stipulates Holocaust and genocide should be taught in the social studies, we know that at least half of the teachers we work with are ELA teachers. And so we would love to encourage more co-teaching and team teaching. And I think this resource would help teachers, I think, work better together. That being said, I mentioned Night and Abby's connection with Elie Wiesel, but also Tooty Fishman, who was also featured on the site. She was born in Cologne, but the family moved to Amsterdam when she was a baby to escape Nazi persecution in Germany. Obviously, they didn't move far enough. But when they were deported to Westerbork, She was there at the same time as Anne Frank. She
Mhm.
was about,
Wow.
I think, 5 years younger. They didn't know each other, but this to be able to trace a local individual
Yeah.
to being in a place that they've read about, and to know that they experienced something very similar to someone who is now an iconic writer, um, I think is a really special thing.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's an eye opener to understand that these are just basic individuals, even though you've heard these names and, it seems like they're over there and famous. It's us, it could be any one of us.
Absolutely. And I think to see that, I think a lot of, and I think the timing of everything it's always been tight in the classroom. It's always been tight. A friend of mine had very casually brought up in conversation one day. She said, "I have to teach 1,000 years of history in 159 days."
Yeah.
And and how do you do that? And it's very hard, but we also don't want to. This is something she also said, was we shouldn't stop teaching the Holocaust when the war ended, because there's so much after that, because you're still kind of you're at the end of the destruction part of it. But if you don't see that there was something after it, and that there was a struggle still to build something new, and to see what these individuals have accomplished since liberation is incredible. It really is. And like I said, you watch some of those testimonies and you're in love, your heart swells. They're really beautiful stories. They're heartbreaking, but it gives us so much perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Does anybody have a question? Kelly, Kathy, or Tom? I just think the approach with empathy and identity is broad enough that even the newer legislation with African American and Latino studies, I mean, that can be woven into those universal themes really well.
Yes, there is. I did actually want to maybe bring that one up really quickly, because it's very, I love this activity. We do it a lot, as often as time allows in the museum tours. But I just absolutely love this activity, because it's hands-on. Essentially, students will get a grid with various identity traits, and they have to kind of highlight in the various colors which ones are most important, which ones make them feel the most safe, the least safe, what gives them power and privilege. This is the grid here, and giving them time to think about these particular traits, to give them categories on how they feel about them, and then talk to their partner or their group. No one ever has the same answers, of course. You learn a lot about the person next to you, and these are really important, and they can be uncomfortable for some students, and but I think on the whole, when we do this in a group during a field trip, I'm always amazed at how brave students get. In the first 2 minutes, it's really quiet, but then once one person talks, you have 15 students who want to say, I feel safe because of my citizenship, or I feel unsafe because of my citizenship. It's really eye-opening, and I think it just creates I think a better understanding between peers. So I absolutely love this this activity, and it's very easily implemented in other curriculum. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And it's also a great icebreaker too. I mean, just get the kids to talk to each other at the start of any unit or any year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
It's interesting when they apply that then to when they learn about a survivor, for
Mhm.
example, and they say,
Mhm.
well, this person didn't come from a religious family. This person, never identified as, you know, being Jewish. They were German. That was what they identified as, but it didn't matter at that point. Um, the ideologies had completely changed how society behaved. And I think that that's where they kind of make those connections, and why people are persecuted, um, and then contextualizing what that means for individuals. Yeah.
Yeah. This work is so important, particularly
Thank
as
you.
the generation, passes on and witness, the notion of witness, being a witness and all of that has to be carried forward.
Yes, and we're very fortunate to work with a lot of children of survivors.
Yeah.
They are very active in everything that we create, and their grandchildren are becoming more involved. Actually, Abby Weiner's granddaughter wants to contribute something to this site, and she wants to be able to create some kind of project, and kind of introduce this to her classmates, and say, this is my grandfather and this is his experience, and this is why it's important for you to remember, and for you to act with kindness and understanding.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's all very emotional. It
Yeah.
becomes very personal.
Yeah.
But it's the most rewarding thing to see how young people, and this granddaughter, I think she's 12.
Yeah.
Yes, I think she's 12. So I mean, the even just the age group itself is extremely varying. But we're very, very fortunate to have multiple generations investing in this for the benefit of everyone. Yeah.
And their questions too at certain ages is just so revealing of such innocence. And then it's like, whoa, you really need to know this because, you don't.
Yeah.
That's sort of interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Makes it more urgent, makes it more purposeful, more urgent, so.
Yes. And I think one thing we're excited about is, since legislation was passed, we helped create an advisory committee to kind of talk about how do we best assist educators in implementing this. And a professor at Central Connecticut State University every fall has a statistics kind of survey course, where a group of students create survey questions, of course with the help of the organization they're working with. They design a survey and administer it to the people that it's targeted at. So at the moment they chose our group last year, and at the moment they have a survey out to educators across Connecticut to to say what is your experience with Holocaust and genocide education, what obstacles are there, what resources are you aware of, which resources or materials is your district or your school, or what's lacking.
Right.
And we're hoping that with the results of that survey, we'll be able to fill in gaps where we find them. And I really hope this project will just make life a little bit easier for teachers. I'm continually in awe of the pressure and the tasks that the world is asking of you.
Well, I mean, the other thing we kind of should be consoled with the notion that education doesn't stop and end just with us in the classroom.
Yeah.
I mean, we would hope that after 12 years and they graduate high school, their own personal education continues on. So we might bemoan, oh, not covering this, this, or this. We just have to hope that they will do that as they move on, and just through own personal inquiry and interest, they continue their own education. So.
Yes, and I think one last thing, I guess, about the site that someone had mentioned to us. He is a veteran teacher. He's something like because of people like Abby Weiner, he said he refuses to retire. And he said that what he liked about this particular site was that it was created, I can't really, I mean, he said it much more eloquently, but that the materials and the approach to how teachers should use this is, the approach was that we are equal as creators of this content. We are equal to the people who are in the classroom. We are not here to teach, we're not here above you trying to tell you how to do things. This is from educator to educator. This is how this can make your lessons in this particular topic more personal, more emotional, and help you make a better personal connection with your students. And that, and that educators can equally contribute to a project like this. Yeah. And we really hope that through feedback and through extended use of the site, that teachers will be able to tell us, this site could really use X, Y, and Z. And that would help us, so yep. We're really proud of what we've got on there at this point.
Yeah,
but we're really looking forward to being able to add more stories of survival, more genocides, and really just meet the spirit of the legislation.
Yep. It's great work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.